This is an introduction to the creation of a view called Constellation in the Rangecast player. Constellation is a special purpose view that's available in the player uh, through the Views dropdown. By default, it has coded names like this in the button format, and in the list format has groups of channels organized into single buttons. And the naming and the what's grouped together can be customized in various ways through the administrative screens. On the administrative screens, there is access to the programming utility, and this view is defined on the Constellation page. It's kind of a special purpose view. And the ease and benefit of using the Constellation format for creating a view is that it's done entirely through a user interface format, no programming process involved to it. The downside is it's fairly limited in what it can do. It creates a single view by the name of Constellation, and so if you want more complex or more variety, or you want particular things that this doesn't provide, then the rules-based view may be more appropriate for those applications. But in many cases, this is quite sufficient. An important thing to know going into this is that in the channel database, channels are organized into a hierarchy of channels, groups, and systems working up. And the meaning of what's considered a system varies in different circumstances. It may be in some cases a trunked radio system. It may be in some cases the conventional channels in a county. But most importantly, the group level will organize a group of channels that are related to each other in some way. And these are expressed in the programmer through these yellow stripes. These divide each of the groups of channels in this hierarchy. So for example, we see here that all of the fire channels in Collin County organized into this single group. And we scroll down here, we see the Collin County Sheriff is organized as a single group. So although there's well over a dozen channels sitting here that are part of the Sheriff's Department, the working at the group level gives you a way to conceptually work with the concept of Collin County Sheriff as a single entity and potentially assign that to a single button. In the Constellation page, or the Constellation profile, by default, each of the groups is expressed as a single button. And at the beginning, if no configuration work has been done, it doesn't know what you want to call each of these groups to be in a compact space that fits on a button like this. You can hover over any of these. You'll get a description of what that group of channels is. But the label, if you want to give it a name, needs to be entered manually. And that's done through the programming interface on these text boxes on these yellow lines. You can enter here the name of that you want for the group. So you find some way of expressing Collin County Sheriff, abbreviated appropriately to fit in the available space, and you put that on that line. When you do that, then all the channels in that group, all those sheriff channels, they already would appear as a single button in the Constellation. They'd be grouped onto a button that has a meaningful name at that time. So a simple way of making a general profile, because there's usually too many individual channels to show on the player at once, is you can go through this form and give a name to each of the groups, each of the yellow lines. And when you're done with that, you can go to the end of this page, press Apply Changes to register that text entry you've done into the programmer, and then you go to Save Options and push Save to commit those changes. So those are the two things you need to do after entering information in that way. Now, sometimes although in many cases working by group is the best way to go, in some cases there will be individual channels within a group that are more active, more important, that you want to split out onto their own buttons. And when that's the case, then you have the option of, let's see, I'm on the collections, not Constellation. I'm on the wrong page there. Here, I'll go to the right one now. You have the option of splitting off individual channels. So normally, for instance, all of these Collin County Fire channels would appear as a single button on the Constellation view. Now, if you wanted to take Blue Ridge Fire specifically, for instance, and put that on its own button, you could go to the left here on that channel and check mark. So you can do this for as many channels as you want in one shot. And then you would go to the bottom of this page here, and you would change the Constellation scan status. You could change that one we have here to mark as scan, apply changes to that. And now when we go up, what we'll see for that fire department is over here, it now has a little entry box and the word scan next to it without parentheses. And that means this channel has been split out from the group for display purposes on the Constellation view. And if I was to save this, that Blue Ridge Fire would appear on its own button. Now, the name that's used for those individual channels that are split out is the name that's put here. You can enter a new name in the text entry box, just like you would for the groups here, and then whatever's saved there shows up in this button column afterwards, so you can see what you had. And then that's a way of breaking out individual channels that might be more active and having those be on their own buttons. You're not entirely held to the group's hierarchy for all of your channels. Now, if you want to combine channels, let's say you've got a bunch of channels that might not belong on their own button, they can be grouped together, you can give the same name to multiple groups. If you were to call both of these Colin, for instance, then with the exact same name on those two groups, then the channels in those groups will be grouped together onto a single button called Colin. If two buttons are said to have the same name here, it assumes they should be in the same place. And you can also create, for instance, a button called Miscellaneous for a catch-all for a lot of the low-use channels that might be on their own groups, like potentially, say, this Fire Ops channel up here that's on its own group, just to tuck those all away into so they take up fewer buttons. So this approach is, as far as when you'd want to use this, this is useful if you're creating a single view for your operation. And you can create additional views as rules, so you're not restricted to only having one. But this process only creates one view. And so this is generally useful if you want to have a single regional view that covers the entire area and uses the system group channel hierarchy to a large extent to organize those channels into buttons. And if that meets your requirements, this provides a user interface method to work directly with the labels right next to the channels, and so it's fairly easy to see what you're doing in that fashion. And again, when this is done, the end result is in the Rangecast player. It's the view called Constellation.